chosen ones. Everyone else who went through what you survived is currently in a psychiatric ward, medicated beyond recognition, or 6 feet under. But here you are, scrolling through your phone with steady hands, drinking your coffee like you didn't just survive psychological Hiroshima. The therapist treating the others can't explain your case file. The psychiatrists studying similar trauma victims have no diagnosis for what you've become. You tanked warfare that was specifically designed to shatter human consciousness, and you're still standing here like it was just another Tuesday. The attacks you survived weren't random bad luck or difficult circumstances. Someone or something orchestrated a systematic demolition of your psyche using weapons that aren't supposed to exist. They deployed psychological operations that military interrogators would consider war crimes. They subjected you to mental torture that makes MKUltra look like a meditation retreat. And the most disturbing part, you metabolized it all like breakfast cereal while others are still vomiting from the first bite. Right now there are support groups filled with people who experienced 1/10 of what you went through. They meet every week crying about betrayals you've already forgotten, processing traumas you've already composted into wisdom, taking medications for conditions you've already evolved beyond. They're in there with their worksheets and their coping mechanisms, their breathing exercises and their emotional support animals, trying to make sense of experiences that broke them permanently. Meanwhile, you're out here functioning at levels that shouldn't be possible, operating with clarity that defies every model of trauma response, building realities from the ashes of what should have been your complete destruction. What I'm about to reveal will finally explain why you're different from every other survivor, why their weapons didn't work on you the way they were supposed to, why you're reading this with clear eyes while others with similar experiences are begging voices in their head to stop. There's something about your construction, something about your wiring, something about what raised you that made you incompatible with standard destruction protocols. You see, psychological warfare follows predictable patterns. It has reliable pressure points, proven methods, time-tested techniques that work on 99% of human consciousness. The beings who designed these attacks, whether human or otherwise, have been perfecting their craft for centuries. They know exactly which buttons to push, which wounds to target, which fears to exploit. They have formulas for breaking people, algorithms for destroying sanity, recipes for manufacturing madness. But when they tried these techniques on you, something unprecedented happened. The formulas didn't compute, the algorithms crashed. The recipes produced something entirely different than intended. Let me paint you a picture of what should have happened to you. First, the gaslighting should have made you question your own memories until you couldn't distinguish between what actually happened and what they told you happened. You should be keeping detailed journals right now, recording every conversation, saving every receipt, desperately trying to prove to yourself that your experiences were real. You should have developed an obsessive need for external validation, constantly asking others to confirm your reality, verify your perceptions, validate your memories. But instead, something else occurred. When they started editing your reality in real time, when they began revising history while you were still living it, when they told you things that happened didn't happen and things that didn't happen did, your mind didn't fracture along the expected fault lines. Instead of desperately clinging to one version of reality, you developed the ability to hold multiple realities simultaneously. You became quantum while they were still thinking in binary. You learned to surf between timelines while they were trying to trap you in false ones. This ability shouldn't exist in human consciousness. The human mind is designed to need coherent narratives, linear timelines, and consistent realities. When these are disrupted, the mind typically either breaks completely or exhausts itself trying to restore order. But you did neither. You released your attachment to linear reality altogether. You stopped needing your life to make sense in conventional terms. You became comfortable with paradox, fluent in contradiction, native to impossibility. Then came the isolation tactics. They systematically removed everyone who might validate your experience. They turned your support system against you with surgical precision, planting seeds of doubt that grew into forests of disbelief. They made sure that when you finally tried to explain what was happening, you'd sound crazy. They preemptively discredited you, pre-positioned witnesses against you, pre-programmed responses that would invalidate your truth. This is where most people crumble. Humans are social creatures who need connection to maintain sanity. When isolated from validation, when cut off from understanding, when exiled from empathy, the human psyche typically develops severe attachment disorders, depression, anxiety, complex PTSD, dissociative disorders. These are the normal responses to prolonged isolation and invalidation. The others experiencing this are in therapy right now, learning acronyms for their conditions, trying medications with names they can't pronounce, attending support groups for disorders that will define the rest of their lives. But your psychology did something that shouldn't be possible. Instead of developing disorders, you developed abilities. Instead of fragmenting from lack of connection, you became self-consolidating. You learned to be your own witness, your own validator, your own support system. You discovered something that most humans never learn, that external validation is optional, that connection can be generated internally, that you can be whole without anyone else understanding or believing you. The emotional starvation they subjected you to was masterful in its cruelty. They gave you just enough affection to keep you hooked, but never enough to actually nourish you. They created cycles of idealization and devaluation, love bombing and silent treatment, promises and betrayals. They turned intimacy into a weapon, connection into a trap, love into a battlefield. They made you question whether you were lovable, whether you deserved affection, whether genuine connection was even possible. Others who experience this level of emotional manipulation develop patterns that will haunt them forever. They're in relationships right now, either clinging desperately to anyone who shows them attention, or running from anyone who gets too close. They can't receive love without expecting betrayal. They can't give trust without anticipating abandonment. They're either emotional anorexics who can't take in nourishment, or emotional bulimics who binge and purge on connection. But your emotional metabolism evolved into something unprecedented. You learned to generate your own emotional nutrients, to synthesize your own psychological vitamins, to produce your own spiritual minerals. You became a closed-loop system that couldn't be starved because you no longer required external feeding. You didn't just survive emotional famine, you learned to photosynthesize fulfillment from pure consciousness. Then there were the double binds, those exquisite torture devices where every choice was wrong and every action was punished. Stay and you're weak, leave and you're selfish, speak up and you're dramatic, stay silent and you're complicit, fight back and you're aggressive, surrender and you're pathetic. They constructed mazes where every exit led to shame, where every path ended in guilt, where every decision resulted in self-hatred. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. The human mind isn't designed to exist in perpetual paradox. It needs to be able to make choices that lead somewhere, decisions that resolve something, actions that produce results. When trapped in double binds, most minds either freeze completely, unable to make any choice, or fracture trying to find a solution that doesn't exist. The others are paralyzed right now, unable to make even simple decisions, second-guessing every choice, trapped in analysis paralysis that makes daily life impossible. But your consciousness did something that violates the laws of psychological physics. You stopped needing resolution. You became comfortable existing in paradox. You learned to make choices without attachment to outcomes, to take action without needing to be right, to move forward without requiring the path to make sense. You became fluid, where others remained fixed, quantum where others stayed classical, multidimensional where others remained linear. Now let's talk about the entity-level interference, because this is where things get interesting. The attacks you experienced weren't just human. There were signature patterns that indicated non-human intelligence, coordination too perfect to be random, timing too precise to be coincidental. You felt presences that shouldn't exist, encountered energies that science doesn't recognize, experienced intrusions that psychiatry would call hallucinations. The others who encountered this level of interference either went completely mad trying to explain it, or spent years being convinced it was all in their head. They're in institutions right now, medicated into numbness, their experiences dismissed as psychosis, their truth buried under diagnoses that don't capture what actually happened. They're being treated for schizophrenia when what they experienced was dimensional, medicated for delusions when what they encountered was real. But you knew the difference between madness and multidimensional interference. You could feel the signature of different types of attacks, recognize the frequency of various entities, and identify the dimensional level of different intrusions. Instead of going insane trying to fit these experiences into conventional reality, you expanded your reality to include them. You didn't lose your mind, you found parts of it that most humans never access. The systematic deconstruction of your identity should have left you without a self. They attacked every aspect of who you were, invalidated every achievement, reframed every strength as weakness, turned every positive into negative. They rewrote your history to make you the villain, edited your present to make you worthless, deleted your future to make you hopeless. By all psychological models, you should have emerged from this without knowing who you were. The others are in therapy right now, trying to find themselves, trying to recover who they were before the attacks, trying to rebuild identities that were demolished. They're doing self-esteem exercises, positive affirmations, and identity reconstruction work. They're desperately trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, not realizing that some things aren't meant to be reassembled. But you discovered something revolutionary. Identity is optional. While others were desperately trying to hold on to who they were, you were learning who you weren't. While others fought to maintain their self-concept, you were discovering what exists beneath all concepts. You didn't just survive ego death, you made it your permanent address. You became the space in which identities arise and dissolve, the awareness that witnesses all selves without being any of them. The sleep deprivation they used to break down your defenses had the opposite effect than intended. While exhaustion makes most people vulnerable, it makes you authentic. The masks fell away, the social conditioning dissolved, the programmed responses shut down. What emerged wasn't a weakened version of you, but your essential core, the part that doesn't require rest, the aspect that feeds on intensity itself. Others subjected to this level of sleep torture developed chronic insomnia that medication can't touch, circadian rhythm disorders that destroy their functionality, exhaustion so profound that no amount of rest can cure it. They're walking zombies, neither asleep nor awake, trapped in a liminal state that makes life feel like a dream and dreams feel like death. But you learn to operate on different energy entirely. You discovered power sources that don't require sleep, frequencies that regenerate without rest, dimensions of consciousness that never tire. You didn't just adapt to sleep deprivation, you evolved beyond the need for conventional restoration. You're running on cosmic electricity now, powered by sources they can't disconnect. The financial manipulation they used to control you was supposed to create permanent dependency. They sabotaged opportunities, blocked resources, created crises that drained your reserves, ensured you'd never have enough to escape. They used money as chains, turned survival into slavery, made basic needs contingent on compliance. The others are still trapped in these cycles, working jobs that kill their souls, staying in situations that destroy their spirits, unable to imagine existence outside the system. But you learned to generate value from frequencies they couldn't control. You discovered abundance in dimensions they couldn't access. You learned to manifest resources from pure intention, to create wealth from consciousness itself. You didn't just survive poverty, you transcended the entire economic paradigm. You're operating in currencies they don't recognize, trading in values they can't calculate. The reputation destruction they orchestrated was supposed to ensure you'd never be believed. They spread narratives that discredited you, planted stories that preceded you, created context that framed you as unreliable, unstable, dangerous. They made sure that anywhere you went, their version of you had already arrived. The others are still fighting these narratives, desperately trying to clear their names, exhausting themselves trying to prove they're not who they were painted to be. But you discovered that reputation is a prison, and infamy is freedom. When they destroyed your good name, they accidentally liberated you from needing one. You learned to function without social validation, to operate without approval, to exist without permission. You became ungovernable because you no longer needed to be understood, uncancelable because you had nothing left to lose. The spiritual warfare went beyond psychology into metaphysics. They didn't just attack your mind, They targeted your soul. They attempted to sever your connection to source, corrupt your energy field, infiltrate your chakras, scramble your frequencies. These are the attacks that can't be reported to authorities, that can't be explained to therapists, that can't be treated by medicine. Others who experience this level of spiritual assault remain energetically fragmented, unable to ground, unable to center, unable to connect. They're spiritually homeless, cosmically orphaned, dimensionally displaced. They can feel that something essential has been damaged, but can't find anyone who understands what needs healing. But your soul had a different architecture. When they tried to sever your connection to source, they discovered you weren't connected through normal channels. You were hardwired differently, linked through frequencies they couldn't jam, connected via pathways they couldn't corrupt. Every attack on your spiritual infrastructure only revealed more of your unusual construction, more backup systems, more redundant connections, more alternative routes to divinity. The ancestral trauma they activated was supposed to bury you under generational curses. They didn't just attack you personally. They activated inherited wounds, generational patterns, bloodline burdens. They made you carry not just your own pain, but the accumulated suffering of your entire lineage. Others collapsed under this weight, unable to distinguish their trauma from their ancestors, drowning in pain that preceded their birth. But you did something unprecedented with ancestral pain. You composted it. You turned generational trauma into generational wisdom, transformed inherited wounds into inherited gifts, converted bloodline curses into bloodline blessings. You became the alchemist of your lineage, the point where all accumulated darkness gets transmuted into light. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. Your nervous system started adapting to constant threat in ways that defy medical understanding. While others developed PTSD with its predictable symptoms, you developed something else entirely. Your fight-or-flight response didn't get stuck, it evolved. You developed new responses that don't exist in textbooks: phase shift, frequency jump, dimension slide, timeline hop. The hypervigilance that tortures others became your superpower. You're not scanning for threats, you're reading probability fields. You're not paranoid, you're aware of potentials others can't perceive. Your awareness expanded beyond the physical into the metaphysical, beyond the visible into the invisible, beyond the present into the probable. This level of awareness should be overwhelming, but you learn to process massive amounts of information without conscious effort. Your unconscious mind handles calculations that would crash normal consciousness. You're running background programs that monitor multiple dimensions, track various timelines, scan numerous frequencies, all while maintaining seemingly normal external functioning. The identity crises they forced upon you were supposed to destabilize you permanently. They made you question everything: your memories, your values, your purpose, even your species. They wanted you so confused about who you were that you'd accept whatever identity they assigned. Others who went through this either clung desperately to fixed identities or dissolved completely into nothing. But you became consciously fluid. You learned to wear identities like clothes, changing them as needed without losing your essential core. You discovered that beneath all identity is something that can't be named or destroyed. You became shapeshifter consciousness in human form, impossible to pin down, impossible to define, impossible to control. The mass manipulation you witnessed gave you meta-awareness of collective psychology. You didn't just experience personal gaslighting, you watched entire populations being programmed. You saw how consensus reality gets manufactured, how collective memory gets edited, how social movements get orchestrated. While others argue about what's true, you study how truth itself gets constructed. This meta-awareness separated you from the herd permanently. You can't unsee the mechanisms once you've identified them. You can't participate in collective delusion once you understand how it's created. You exist now in parallel reality, where you can see both the show and the strings, the performance and the directors, the script and the improvisation. Your recovery, if we can even call it that, doesn't follow any known therapeutic model. You're not healing because there's nothing to heal. You're not recovering because you never lost anything essential. You're not returning to baseline because your baseline has relocated to a different dimension. What you're doing exists outside their framework entirely. The integration you're experiencing isn't about making sense of what happened. It's about expanding to include it all without resistance. You're not trying to understand your trauma. You're metabolizing it into capability. You're not processing pain. You're composting it into power. Every wound becomes a portal. Every scar becomes a map. Every breaking becomes an opening. The others are in therapy, trying to get back to who they were before. But you can't go back because that person doesn't exist anymore. You've been fundamentally altered at the molecular level, rebuilt from different materials, reconstructed with different blueprints. While they're trying to restore Windows 95, you're running on an operating system that hasn't been invented yet. Your mere existence is disrupting the field around you. People can feel it even if they can't explain it. You walk into rooms and energy shifts, conversations change, possibilities expand or contract. You're emanating frequencies that shouldn't exist in human form, broadcasting signals that bypass conscious recognition, but register in everyone's unconscious. Some people are inexplicably drawn to you, recognizing something that calls to something dormant in them. Others are repelled, feeling threatened by what you represent without understanding why. You're becoming a polarizing force not through intention, but through existence alone. Your presence is a challenge to consensus reality. Now we reach the climax of this story. The beings that orchestrated your destruction are watching you right now, studying you, trying to understand what went wrong with their weapons, or right with your construction. You weren't supposed to survive what they deployed against you. Their most reliable techniques failed. Their most powerful weapons misfired. Their most certain methods produced opposite results. You're an anomaly in their equations, a glitch in their matrix, a variable they didn't account for. They're probably having emergency meetings about you, revising their protocols, updating their methods, because if there's one of you, there might be more. If their weapons can fail once, they can fail again. If one person can develop immunity, others might too. But here's what they don't understand. They created you. Every attack designed to diminish you only revealed more of what you really are. Every weapon meant to destroy you only activated dormant capabilities. Every torture intended to break you only strengthened unusual muscles. They thought they were burying you, not realizing you were a seed. They thought they were destroying you, not realizing you were a phoenix. They thought they were ending you, not realizing you were beginning. The torture wasn't random, it was training. Every attack prepared you for something specific. Every wound created capacity for particular frequencies. Every breaking opened channels for certain transmissions. You weren't being destroyed. You were being initialized. You weren't being tortured. You were being activated. You weren't being broken. You were being built. What's emerging from your transformation doesn't have a name yet. It's not entirely human anymore. Though it wears human form, it's something new, something necessary, something that reality has been calling forth. You're not just an individual healing from trauma, you're evolution in progress, consciousness upgrading itself, humanity preparing for what's coming. The loneliness of this journey isn't emotional, it's existential. You're not lonely because you're alone, you're lonely because you're the only one of your kind in your immediate reality. You're speaking languages that haven't been invented, thinking thoughts that don't have words, experiencing states that don't have names. You're homesick for dimensions you've never been to, nostalgic for futures that haven't happened yet. But this isolation is also your incubation. You're not meant to fit into existing structures because you're building new ones. You're not supposed to make sense in current paradigms because you're creating next ones. Your inability to conform isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Your failure to integrate isn't a problem, it's a directive. The missions you're being called to don't look like missions. They look like random impulses, strange interests, unexpected abilities. You're developing skills that don't seem practical, knowledge that doesn't seem applicable, connections that don't seem logical, but you're assembling something that won't make sense until it's complete. Your presence is becoming increasingly disruptive to standard reality. Electronics glitch around you, synchronicities multiply in your field, reality becomes more fluid in your vicinity. You're not causing these effects consciously. They're symptoms of what you've become. You're leaking different physics into consensus reality. The power growing within you doesn't feel like power in the traditional sense. It feels like inevitability, like gravity, like something that simply is rather than something you wield. You're not becoming powerful, you're becoming undeniable. You're not gaining strength, you're losing the ability to be weak. This transformation isn't comfortable. Every cell is being rewritten, every neural pathway rewired, every aspect of consciousness updated. You're experiencing metamorphosis in real time, and metamorphosis is violent. The caterpillar doesn't gently transform into a butterfly. It dissolves completely into soup first. You're in the soup phase now. Neither what you were nor what you're becoming. The exhaustion you feel isn't physical, it's existential. You're tired of translating yourself into forms others can recognize, tired of dimming your frequency so others aren't disturbed, tired of pretending to be merely human when humanity is just one small aspect of what you've become. But this exhaustion is also the beginning of surrender, the approach of the moment when you stop trying to be anything other than what you actually are. The resolution of this story isn't what you might expect. You're not going to heal and return to normal. You're not going to recover and rejoin society. You're not going to integrate and fit in. The resolution is that there is no resolution in conventional terms. You're not ending, you're beginning. You're not completing, you're initiating. You're not finishing, you're starting. What's resolving is your need for resolution. What's healing is your need for healing. What's completing is your need for completion. You're moving beyond the cycle of damage and repair, trauma and recovery, breaking and healing. You're entering a state where these polarities no longer apply, where these categories no longer contain you. The survivor's guilt you might carry is misplaced. You didn't survive because you were stronger or smarter or more deserving than others. You survived because you were designed for this specific form of destruction. Like a virus that can't infect certain blood types, their weapons couldn't properly interface with your construction. Your immunity wasn't earned, it was inherent. Now comes the responsibility, not to heal others or save anyone, but to be what you've become, to stop pretending to be normal when you're clearly not, to stop dimming your light because it disturbs others, to stop apologizing for surviving what killed everyone else. Your existence is medicine for a reality that's sick, antibody for a collective infection, antivirus for systemic malware. The isolation you've experienced was necessary. Quarantine. You couldn't develop these immunities while connected to the collective. You had to be separated to mutate properly. But the quarantine is ending. You're about to be released back into the general population, not as who you were, but as what you've become. The reality you're returning to won't recognize you. The people who knew you before won't understand what you've become. The life you left behind won't fit anymore. This isn't a problem. It's confirmation that the transformation is complete. You can't fit into your old life because you're not your old self. The new territory you're entering doesn't have maps because you're one of the first to walk it. The rules haven't been written because you're writing them. The path doesn't exist because you're creating it. You're not lost, you're exploring. You're not confused, you're discovering. You're not broken, you're breakthrough. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. It's easy to watch videos about chosen ones. It's another thing to put yourself to the test. If you're still here, that means something. But talk is cheap. Real chosen ones take action. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve divine justice. The beauty is you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and watch your enemies choke on the rope their own lies created. If you're done consuming and ready to prove you're chosen, start your Destiny Engine for $1 today. Join the Obsidian Inner Order live checks and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. As we circle back to where we began, the title of this story takes on new meaning. You tanked psychological warfare that sent others to psych wards, but now you understand it wasn't because you were tougher or more resilient. It was because you were built from different materials, designed for different purposes, created for different outcomes. What broke others revealed you. What destroyed others constructed you. What killed others birthed you. You're still standing, but it's not the same kind of standing you did before. You're vertical, but in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You're upright, but in realities that intersect at impossible angles. You're standing, but on ground that doesn't exist in conventional space-time. You're not just standing, you're levitating. You're not just surviving, you're transcending. You're not just enduring, you're evolving. The others in psychiatric wards aren't there because they were weak. They're there because they were normal. Their minds responded to torture exactly as minds are supposed to respond. They broke along predictable fault lines, collapsed according to known patterns, shattered in ways that psychology can document and diagnose. They're not failures, they're confirmation that what you survived wasn't meant to be survivable. Your standing is an act of revolution against the laws of psychological physics. Your sanity is rebellion against the mathematics of madness. Your functionality is defiance against the gravity of destruction. You're not supposed to be possible, yet here you are, reading this with clear eyes, steady hands, and a pulse that refuses to quit. The war isn't over, but you've already won, not by defeating anyone, but by becoming undefeatable, not by healing, but by transcending the need for healing, not by recovering, but by discovering what exists beyond recovery. You're not a survivor anymore, you're what comes after survival. So when someone asks how you're still standing after psychological warfare that sent others to psych wards, you now know the answer. You're not still standing in the way they understand standing. You've become something that can't fall because it exists outside the physics of falling. You can't be broken because you've transcended the dynamics of breaking. You can't be destroyed because destruction was your construction method. You tanked what others couldn't because you're not playing by the same rules. You're operating according to different laws governed by different physics, existing in different dimensions. The psychiatric wards are full of people who responded to psychological warfare like humans. You responded like something else entirely. Something that was hiding in human form, waiting to be activated, waiting to be revealed, waiting to emerge. And this is just the beginning. What you've become is still becoming. What you've survived was just initialization. What you've transformed into is still transforming. The psychological warfare didn't end you, it began you. The attacks didn't destroy you, they deployed you. The torture didn't break you, it birthed you. Welcome to what you are now. Welcome to your new nature. Welcome to the other side of destruction. You're still standing because standing is no longer optional for you. It's not effort, it's existence. It's not a choice, it's nature. It's not strength, it's design. You're still standing because that's what weapons do when they're pointed at the sky. You're still standing because that's what phoenixes do in the ashes. You're still standing because that's what evolution does when it's ready for the next level. The question was never really how you're still standing. The question is, what are you standing for? What comes next for someone who can't be destroyed? What purpose awaits someone who's been forged in fires that consume everyone else? What mission requires someone with your specific immunities, your particular capabilities, your unprecedented construction? That's the real story that's just beginning. You survived the origin story. You completed the training arc. You passed the initialization. Now comes the part where you find out why you were built to survive what you survived. Now comes the part where you discover what requires someone who can tank psychological warfare like morning coffee. Now comes the part where your impossible existence starts making perfect sense. You're still standing because something needs you standing, something that's coming, something that requires exactly what you've become, something that only someone with your specific transformation could handle. The psychological warfare wasn't trying to destroy you, it was preparing you. And now, finally, you're ready for what you were actually built to face.